Good afternoon. Hopefully everybody's managed to get in okay, and they've had fun with the virtual event session. I know there's been some hiccups, but this happens with innovation, doesn't it? It never goes right the first time, but the second time, absolutely perfect. So just to take just a couple of minutes to intro who we are and what we're talking about. We're going to take sort of half an hour, 40 minutes, just to explain a little bit about our approach to the hybrid classroom. Now, introductions first of all. I'm John Wilson. I'm the CEO at Genta. We own and operate the Vscene service for education. Many of you have probably heard of us, and many of you probably use us already. But it's a good opportunity for us to explain to you what our plans are and what we've been doing over the last year or so, and what our plans are for the future. So let's go back to the beginning of the pandemic. Digital strategies were being written. There were some new ideas on the hybrid classroom and connecting learning spaces. And then a bus hit us. So digital strategies were scrapped. They were effectively thrown out the windows. And everybody had to work together to look at ways for us to be able to maintain continuity across education. This was hard. It's been hard for everybody across education. We work with the community on a practically daily basis, and we've heard a lot of the issues that people have been having, and but there has been positives. It has allowed people to reassess the whole learning landscape and the ecosystem, if you will, on how we approach inclusive learning and engaged learning. Remote lessons have worked for some, but for many they haven't, because they've missed the most crucial part of learning and teaching, and that's the social element. Moving back into physical buildings, we can't forget the lessons from lockdown, to steal from the previous session, but it allows us to kind of reimagine, what we can do and what the possibilities are when it comes to our how we can connect the classroom to the world, how we can open up more inclusivity, how we can offer up more participation within lessons. Our approach to the hybrid classroom is that, look, we want it to be classroom-centric, and we want it to be human-centric. How do we use what we've learned collectively to provide a hybrid classroom for the future and from now? How can we connect people from outside the classroom in, but still maintain continuity in the experience, and most importantly, continuity in that human connection. So I'll introduce you to Mark Frost at Intel. Now, Agenta and Intel have been working together on innovative technologies that we can bring in to the learning and teaching space to provide a really exciting experience for the learners, But it's also about, it's not just the in-class experience, it's the whole class experience. And what I mean by whole class experience is that it shouldn't be impeding the fact that remote students are not in the classroom. It should be enhancing. We should be using digital technology to enhance the aspect of remote learning as part of the whole class. Historically, passive learning has been the pedagogy of choice, but we're moving now at a great scale into more active, participatory, and shared learning pedagogies. And how do we utilize technology to support that? Technology has always been a barrier. How do we ensure that it's an enabler for now and for going forward? So I'll introduce to Mark Frost at Intel, who'll speak for about 10, 15 minutes on what Intel are doing within the classroom, within the learning space. And then after that, I'll show you some case examples of how we've succeeded across the whole spectrum of education, from schools through further education, colleges, and higher education. Mark, would you mind introducing yourself and giving us your magic, please?
The magic. Woo. Thank you, John. And actually, the word I like there was possibilities, and that's always that's something we're always really interested in. Trying to make the impossible possible. That's like a big ethos and mantra inside Intel, and hopefully we can cover some of that today. So, Hi, yeah, I'm Mark from Intel's Internet of Things group. I'm in kind of one of our marketing teams, and I look after our kind of education strategy for Europe and what Intel's trying to do in Europe. So I don't know if we can get the first slide up, please, Inka. Actually, while that's coming up, yeah, some of you may be thinking, well, why aren't Intel here? You know, aren't the Intel the processor and chipset guys you see in our laptops? You know, why on earth are Intel here? But actually, we cover a lot of different areas, and we do have a pretty big education team worldwide, particularly in China, where there's an awful lot of innovation in education going on at the moment. So what I'm hoping today is to share some of those perspectives from a global viewpoint with you guys. We'll talk a bit about some of the issues with the hybrid classroom. We'll talk a bit about some of our vision for this kind of hybrid classroom and how we help to humanize it, and then some examples of how this kind of vision is being realized. So next slide, please, Inka. So technology growth, you know, from a global perspective, we're seeing, you know, massive growth, compound annual growth rates of 19-20% over the next 5 to 6 years. A lot of teachers now saying that digital learning content will totally replace printed textbooks in the next 10 years. Now, obviously, in some parts of the world, this has already partially happened or nearly almost happened. In other parts of the world, we are miles away from that. 42% of teachers are saying that at least one digital device is used in the classroom every day. And then probably more significantly, by 2030, we're seeing a global estimated expenditure of around $10 trillion on education. So it's a massive area. And that's kind of supported by governments. We're seeing, you know, education modernization around the world. I talked about China. You know, the Chinese government spends a huge amount of money on education technology. In the US, there's the CARES Act. I think they've allocated $82 billion over the next few years to modernize education technology. And that, you know, here in Europe, we have spot points, but if you look particularly at Germany with the Digital Pact program, you know, 7, 8, 9 billion euros to go into just technology for education. So this is happening everywhere. Governments are really behind this, and they're really spending some money. Part of that is new technologies, so better connectivity, trying to bridge the digital divide. You know, some parts of the world have great connectivity, some parts of the world have terrible connectivity, and that really inhibits educational growth and development. So we're trying to help with things like new technologies like 5G, and then some more controversial technologies we'll touch on around computer vision, machine learning, and its place in the classroom. And then the final driver of growth really is, you know, what we've all seen, and John's touched on the whole move to hybrid learning with COVID, and all of the kind of demands that's placed on everybody. So next slide, please. So just thinking about some of the issues, you know, on the left, from a global perspective, again, we've had educators saying, you know, these are the current issues we've had, and I think everyone on the call is familiar with that stuff. But thinking about during the COVID on the right-hand side, people have said that, you know, it's become even harder to manage a class, especially when some of the pupils are remote. It's very difficult to keep students engaged. The traditional way people have taught has had to change, and it's very difficult to teach effectively in a hands-on way. Technology has been a massive problem. It should be an enabler, but it has been a problem for many. You see, you know, stories of schools really struggling with getting their video conferencing platforms up and ready, you know, their lesson planning, their online lesson systems. Institutions have done an amazing job, but it hasn't been easy for them. You know, how do we help improve that? How do we help improve connections with students as well? You know, not everyone's connected into the system, and we're seeing people with, you know, mental health issues coming to the fore now, people feeling very isolated, you know, not part of the experience that John talked about. How do we make that experience where everyone feels like they're in the room together? So next slide, please. So what are we trying to do about this? So Intel's educational vision here. Equality, I've already touched on the digital divide. How do we try and standardize learning without geographical limitations? How do we make things easier for everybody, not just necessarily around the world, but if you look in the UK, there's huge inequalities in education at the moment. How do we help try and bridge those gaps? Efficiency, we've talked about technology. It has been a barrier, or it can be a barrier. How do we help make it more productive, more streamlined? How do we help educators become more comfortable with the technology, so it's just like, one click, bam, everything's ready to go, my lesson's running straight away without faffing with cables and all sorts of stuff. And then a big driver of that also we see is personalization, making a customizable learning experience for pupils. We think that's going to be a big thing going forward. And then that's kind of supported by a number of interlinked activities. A big one here is industry and academia working together. So here, for example, we've got Intel. We're an enabling partner. We're trying to help enable John and the guys at Agenta do some amazing stuff. But then we need institutions to get involved and take on this technology and work with us on a journey. We're not saying this is necessarily the complete solution. We're saying this is a way forward. Let's work together to try and create something amazing. So industry and academia working together, vitally important. And actually, one other thing I want to touch on here is the data. It's something we don't talk about a lot, but I think we don't know what we don't know. And a lot of the stuff we're putting in place today is around data, collecting data, looking at data, analyzing data. And from that, I think there'll be some really interesting things that come out of this analysis that will help drive a better humanized experience in the hybrid classroom. So next slide, please, Inka. So this is actually, what we're doing to try and realize some of this stuff. So this is an image of a smart campus. This is done by our Chinese team. And, whatever you think about the politics in China, they are really a long way ahead in terms of technology and education. It is quite inspirational in some of the stuff they do. Yes, they have different ethics to us around the use of technology, but some of this can be used. And what we're hoping to do is take some of this stuff from the smart campus and take it so it can be used in Europe. So this is a very popular model in China. If you look at the smart classroom, they've got the interactive flat screens like we see today in a lot of schools. Recording, broadcast and streaming is very popular in China. They often have, for example, there might be like an amazing lecturer in mathematics in a tier 1 city, like in Beijing, for example. So they will, as part of their daily work, often record these lectures and then stream them out to classes around the rest of China that don't necessarily have the best lecturers or the best facilities. Again, China is a country with massive inequalities, and they're trying to level that out by using record, broadcast and streaming technology. Computer vision in the classroom, again, controversial, but we're trying to bring some of that in, and I'll talk a bit about that a bit later on. And then the other part of that is obviously the student terminal. Like that could be the laptop, or the tablet type device, or a thin client device. We see technology around the campus. So it's not just in the classroom. You're thinking about in the library maybe, or in the cafeteria, things like signage, wayfinding, terminals, just making people's experience a little bit easier and a little bit smoother. We see a lot of, particularly again in China, around security, perimeter security. So for example, in some Chinese schools now, there is an airport scanner-like system where you come up to the school recognizes your face, it lets you into the school, the parents get a text message home to say, hey, John's arrived at school, and then the system will track where maybe which lessons John's been to in the day automatically. There's a report generated in the school automatically, and then when you leave the campus at the end of the day, there's a text message home to say, hey, John's left the campus. Again, a lot of that won't necessarily work in Europe, but some of it could do. We're seeing things, particularly in America, there's a demand for things like gunshot detection, people screaming, that kind of stuff. Audio triggers and cues to do something in a system to trigger like an emergency signage system or some emergency alert or some other process in the campus. Again, hopefully we don't see too much of that in Europe, but again, it's very popular in America. And then there's other stuff like simple things like air quality, temperature, humidity, CO2 levels. How do we help generate a simple alert, maybe that someone needs to open a window, for example? It doesn't have to be anything more sophisticated than that. So next, I've got a short video showing how we're looking to realize some of that in Europe. And go in, see if it works.
Education is constantly changing, and flexible interactive learning is leading the way, showing an increase in academic grades, employability, and even personal outcomes. Intel's embedded compute technology provides educators with the tools to deliver a collaborative student experience, whether students are in the room, remotely based, or a hybrid mix. Bringing together individual pieces of Intel technology by creating a hub enables collaboration, video conferencing, and content sharing from any connected device in any location, allowing learning to continue in many different scenarios. Having an edge server in the classroom takes this technology to the next level. Lectures can be captured or broadcast live, providing students with invaluable content when and where they need it. If students choose to opt in, AI technology can be used around the campus and in the classroom to assess student attendance, behaviour, and engagement in class, ultimately helping teachers to deliver the best collaboration and well-being for all students. The possibilities are endless, and together we can change the face of education.
Yeah, I mean, how does this all fit into the classroom? How does this fit into the hybrid classroom environment? Hybrid classroom is a crucial part of the smart campus. And what we are trying to do at Agenta with Vscene is ensure that the technology that we install in the classroom is all future-proofed for all this smart campus stuff, But it's one step at a time, The smart campus, the concept is evolving, and there's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of questions, most importantly around security and safeguarding. And if anybody knows us well, safeguarding is right at the forefront of what we do. So it's ensuring that we can innovate, but also in a highly secure way. So where do we come into this? So if you skip to my slide, please, Inka. There we go. So the concept of what we do is to connect classrooms for the purpose of things like curriculum equity, enhancement and access to subject choice, teaching parity or teaching resource parity. But also there's other aspects of the connected classroom that support things like vocational-based learning. And there's countless projects that we've worked on to connect schools with industry partners for vocational-based learning through things like modern and foundation apprenticeships. The benefit of our technology means that, it doesn't have to be local business up the road. It can be somebody based in Kansas or somebody based in Djibouti or somebody based in Sao Paulo. The possibilities are endless. But coming back to Earth a little bit here is that, there is crucial solutions that need to be solved right now, and that's things like curriculum equity, and that's what we've been doing across local education authorities and local authorities in Scotland over the course of the last couple of years. Now, all of this is great, but the single most important part that I said right at the beginning is that, look, if we are going to be essentially replacing teaching resource or replacing students with a screen in the classroom, we need to get it as close to an immersive, human-like situation as possible. And that's where, next slide, please. That's where our technology comes into. Over the course of the last year, people have done whatever they could to try and get hybrid classrooms up or blended learning up or BLEs or LMS and video conferencing environments like Zoom and Teams and WebEx and Skype and all the rest of it. Our platform tries to connect all of that in a more human-centric way. Yeah, and I'll explain what that means. So Vscene as a platform provides all the aspects of hybrid learning that's required. So we've got the real-time connection in classrooms, the real-time connection into mobile devices, to desktop devices, integration with Teams. So if you are using Teams across your organization, great, we use Teams. Let's allow Teams users to join one of these immersive classrooms that we create without having to impact their normal line of business applications. If they've got a specific workflow, we don't want to upset that. We don't want to try and fit a round peg in a square hole. We don't want to upset the apple cart, all that kind of stuff. And that's what I meant about technology being an enabler rather than a barrier. A teacher's job is hard enough without having to sit and learn yet another bit of technology. They've already got enough to try and learn. So we can provide all of that, as well as the recording of classes, the sharing, the media repository, library, automated scheduling as well. Now, Mark mentioned about, it's great if it's a situation where a teacher or a lecturer can walk into a space and press one button. What if we go one better than that they don't have to press any buttons at all and it's all completely fully automated? That way they can just concentrate on teaching. Yeah. That's the way that we design learning spaces with organizations. That's the way that we do it. And it's all managed and operated through that system. Next slide. So Vscene Pod is essentially the heart of the connected classroom. This is the part that connects other classrooms. So essentially the idea is you get one of these in every classroom, yeah, to allow enhancements to curriculum, enhancements to subject choice, but also connecting your classroom to a wider community of real-time content. You may be connecting your class one day to the National Space Centre, the Manhattan School of Music, NASA. It may be the Scottish University Physics Alliance, that kind of thing. That enhancement, that exciting enhancement to content within the classroom is where the Vscene Pod can really deliver that. I've noticed the copyright sign is 2 inches to the right, which is wrong. I do apologize. That's upsetting my OCD. Anyway, so what does this do when it comes to the human connection? So these devices are extremely high quality. Now, as standard, you can connect 4 4K devices, displays. Each of these displays can have up to 15 students on them. So you can have 3 screens at the back, 1 screen at the front, or you can have screens around. So that allows a wraparound immersive experience, or you can have them all together, which I'll talk about shortly. So when this comes to standard video conferencing, like your Teams and your Zoom and things like that, we provide much higher resolution, much higher frame rate at near zero latency. That really allows that human connection. Now, this is important when it comes to feedback, human feedback from students. If they're scratching their head, or if they're looking a bit confused, or if they're looking away, you really need that feedback. Yeah, and that's the feedback that you get in the classroom. So let's make sure that if they are remote, you still get that feedback as well. So less reliance on technology, less reliance on raise hand or chat or things like that. Let's ask them to physically raise their hand and physically ask a question if they're going to be remotely connecting to that classroom. That allows them to be part of that whole class experience that I spoke about earlier. Also the option to have multiple camera sources, so you can have a camera pointing at this whiteboard, you can integrate with this interactive touch screen, a visualizer, all that kind of stuff, embedding all the different devices that you use within that hybrid learning space in the one unit, the one cost-effective unit in the classroom. Next slide, please. Now, maintaining social continuity. What we mean by this is that if you are connecting either a teacher virtually or students virtually, you need to make sure that you have that social continuity contained within that whole class experience. Now, a little video next, just to show you the kind of power of what our platform can do when it comes to the social learning and the humanized aspect of learning. Could you play the video? Yeah, so what we've got here is 8 screens, on a wall, with each of these students coming up in an ultra high resolution. The teacher that's sitting at a podium there is really able to get facial cues and facial response from everybody that's within that session. Now we can, you can add 4 people on each of these screens, 8 people on each of these screens. Essentially, you can teach that cohort of 200, 300 if you want. But ideally, the situation for this is that, it could sit at the back of the room, or you could have 2 screens at the back of the room, that kind of thing. It just shows you the potential. And the next video that we've got as well is our kind of standard classroom setup for hybrid teaching. The ability to teach from the front or throughout the classroom to the physical cohort of students, and also remotely out to students as well. Now, this may be a mixture of remote teaching or physical in-room teaching, that kind of thing. We've enabled about 500 or 600 learning spaces over the course of the last 2 years, so we really know what works and what doesn't work. Yeah. So what we can do is we can work with organizations on understanding what the digital strategy is, what pedagogy is, and how we can really enhance the physical learning space to benefit from a more connected experience. Yeah, so you can see this is our office here. There's nobody here because of COVID. Yeah, normally we'd have people there. We do have demo days. We've got quite a lot of demonstration days coming up in the calendar. If you go to our website, it'll tell you about some of these upcoming demo days that we've got. But just to finish up on some of the projects that we've worked on, from schools all the way up to universities, there is significant successes there. Significant successes from particularly rural and disadvantaged areas that can't get access to perhaps teaching resource or the right content. By utilizing our technology, it really allows rural and disadvantaged areas to benefit from a wider community of teaching and learning. Yeah, and we've seen significant impacts at, say, East Ayrshire Council, who've had quite a large project across the region, Dumfries and Galloway, Borders, and down south as well. We're working a lot with colleges and schools and universities down there as well. Really create an impact to support that connected and hybrid classroom environment. So that's basically it in a nutshell. There are many other things that we can talk about, and if you do want to find out a little bit more about the technology, or to arrange sort of demonstrations, or for us to understand how we could fit into digital strategy, we're more than happy to answer that. We do have a question here from an anonymous attendee. Oh, dubious. The smart classroom, as illustrated, raises some very interesting questions around privacy and GDPR as mentioned. To what extent should students and or parents under 12s have rights not to be monitored in the ways that you illustrated? Absolutely, categorically, have every right not to be monitored. And this is what, Mark can answer that question from his perspective, but from our perspective, from a security aspect and architecture aspect, as a company, our data only stays in Scottish servers for our Scottish organisations. We're ISO 27001, Cyber Essentials Plus, and we're GDPR accredited and masters across the organisation. We go that little bit further when it comes to safeguarding. Yeah. Mark, could you answer the question on, I know you raised it a little bit earlier on the monitoring software for camera.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's an interesting point, and it's a discussion we should be having, because I think what's going to happen otherwise is that this technology is going to start appearing, and there'll be abuses of the technology going forward. And actually, you've already seen around the world there's some issues with computer vision technology today, with model bias in training, all that kind of stuff. So it's a technology that we need to have a conversation around. There are options already today. So, for example, there's a company in London that makes engagement monitoring software that doesn't use facial detection or doesn't use any individual data. Any of the video streams are kept only in the room, doesn't leave any of the room. It's just metadata that leaves the room. And that is fully GDPR compliant, for example. So there are solutions today that are safe. But I think all of us, if you see a video from another part of the world where, these little kids are being monitored in the class, and it does make something in me go a bit, I don't like that. So we just need to have a discussion. And that's part of the idea of some of the work that we're doing, for example, at the moment at Glasgow. It's, what works? What are the ages that work? University students, maybe some of them have already signed away their rights to privacy on campus anyway when they've joined a course. So, what are the issues there? Can we use this technology? So it's about having a discussion and a conversation before this technology comes in and is used inappropriately, I think.
Good. I think we've run over time. Thanks for that, Mark. So listen, thanks everybody for listening to us. I hope it was of value. If you do want to find out more, you can try and visit our virtual stand, or alternatively, visit vscene.net and fill out the contact form, and one of our specialists will get back in contact with you to chat with you further. But thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.